delighted to be with you here this evening, and I want to share with you something that I have on my mind, and it has to do with making good decisions and what it takes to make good decisions, and why some people are exceptional in making the right decisions and some others struggle. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that my life so far has been a combination of very poor decisions that I've made and some good decisions that I've made. I think most of the lessons I've learned about life have come from the poor decisions that I've made, having to learn from the failures and some of the incorrect decisions that I made in the past. I think that's a slow way of learning. But in any way, it's given me some insight as to what type of person I have to be in the future to be able to make the right decisions. And so I want to share some of my thoughts and some of my ideas with you, and I hope it serves you well, and I hope it meets you in the right place. Now, in reviewing my life, what I realized it was that there are about 5 factors so far that affect the quality of the decisions that I made in the past, but also the quality of the decisions that I will make in the future. And these 5 factors affect everyone, irrespective of who you are, where you were born. These 5 factors will affect the decisions you make. And before I go into the 5 factors, let me start by saying this. Life does not happen by chance. Life happens by choice. We've been given the free will and the power of choice. And I used to be one of those people who I was very good, and when I say good, I was very good in passing the blame to other people. Whenever something went wrong, I had a good reason why it wasn't my fault. I would blame the weather, I would blame my boss, I would blame my colleagues, I would blame the government. I always found something to pass the blame to. I was exceptional in playing the victim card, which was a recipe for disaster because it meant I never grew. And it got to the point where I had to stop and accept complete responsibility. And that was one of the important days that made a difference in the direction of my life. You see, you cannot always change the destination of where you're trying and you're hoping to get to overnight. But one thing you can do is you can change direction. And direction, through consistency, once you've changed and you put yourself on the right course, through consistency, you can arrive in the desired destination. Direction can be changed, and that will lead you towards the destination. By accepting responsibility for my life, it started to make a difference. And I came to the conclusion that there are no victims in life. I used to see myself as a victim. I used to play the victim card. But let me say this, there are no victims in life. We are all volunteers. And I'll say that again. There are no victims in life. We are all volunteers. And the reason is simply because although we cannot control the events that occur, although we cannot control the circumstances that occur in our lives, the outcomes cannot take place without our participation. So life only happens with our involvement. We can control the outcomes because we have a choice to choose how we, number one, react or respond, and the number 2, what we do. So we get the information through the events that occur, we process the information, and this starts the change. And I just, if you have a journal next to you, I want you to just write down these 3 keywords. The events occur. The first thing that you have to do is ask yourself a question. What does this mean? Because the meaning you associate with any event that happens in your life will determine how you feel. That's the second item. So it's what does this mean? How do I feel? And the final third is what do I do? So there are no victims in life because we have the power of choice. We get to participate by our decisions that we make or the indecisions. Indecision is a decision. By deciding that I will do nothing, you're still deciding. We get to choose the meaning we associate with everything that occurs in our life. We get to choose how we feel, and how we feel then decides how we react to the event. So if for any reason you find yourself in the same state that I used to be, which is always looking for someone to blame or something to blame, let me encourage you by saying that the soonest, or as soon as you start to see yourself as the problem, then you start to see yourself as the solution also. If you see yourself as the victim, then you have to wait for something external to happen or to change before your life can change. And I think waiting is one thing that robs a lot of people of their destiny. Because a lot of people are waiting for the government to get better. A lot of people are waiting for a promotion. A lot of people are waiting for the weather to get better. A lot of people are waiting. And time is a limited resource. It's your most important asset, and it doesn't stop. Now, my experience through all of the setbacks I've had has taught me something. That things don't change, but people can. And so by accepting complete responsibility, I started to grow into the man that I should have been. I'm happy to say that every day I feel more empowered, and I feel as though I'm becoming that person that I should be. I'm not there yet, but I'm on my way. But I still made a lot of poor decisions because I didn't have anyone guiding me, but also I wasn't pursuing the right people to seek the knowledge from them. And so what I want to share with you is, like I said at the start, ways through which you can start becoming an exceptional decision maker. Let me say this, and if you have a journal still there with you, I want you to write this statement down. The quality of your life will depend on the quality of the decisions you make on a daily basis, not occasionally, on a daily basis consistently. The quality of your life will be a reflection of the quality and the consistency in the decisions that you make that are right. So it's important that you understand that making decisions is not just something you leave to chance. Decisions create destiny. The decisions I've made so far created the life that I have. If I play back and I go back a number of years, so many years ago, I come to the realization that what I have now, the life that I have now, is really a reflection of a decision that I made so many years ago. The decisions you're making today will shape the future you have tomorrow. So always have at the back of your mind that day by day you're deciding the future based on what you do, based on the decisions you make. So what are these 5 factors that affect your ability to make the right decisions? Let's get into it very quickly. The first of the 5 has to do with what I call your beliefs. Your beliefs are vital. Your beliefs shape and sculpture the decisions you make. That's the first. The second are your philosophies. Now, I found that my philosophies, using me as an example, really affected the way I thought and how I was thinking. Now, understand something. A belief is different from a philosophy. A belief is different from a philosophy. Philosophy has to do with how you think. It's a process that you use to evaluate things that have happened. It's how you feel about things that are happening in the present, in the past, how you feel about people, how you interact with people, how you interpret the world, how you analyze things, how you think. That is your philosophy. It comes from 2 words, phileo and sophi, which has to do with the way you think. A belief, on the other hand, comes from a thought. which is still connected to the way you think. But the difference is that a belief is a thought or a thinking pattern that you consider to be absolute, that you believe. So a belief with an F has to do with a thought that has been repeated so many times to the point where you consider that to be gospel, you consider it to be accurate, you consider it to be the truth. Now you believe with a VE. That becomes something that is founded. We call that a belief with an F. Two different things. So your belief will affect the way you make decisions. Your philosophy about life, about people, about business, about relationships, about health will affect the decisions you make. Now understand something, that you can have a really good set of strong beliefs, but you can have a really poor philosophy about life. On the other hand, you can also have a really poor belief in general as a foundation, but you could have in one area of life a reasonable level of philosophy, maybe about business. So it's not uncommon to see people who are very good and brilliant ethically, morally, but in another area of life, and that could be relationally, that could be health-wise, their philosophy is very different. So they have this contrast. Now let me move quickly. The next thing that affects the decisions you make is your environment. Your environment. Your environment is so powerful. It's so powerful because it influences the decisions you make. It influences how you feel. It influences what you see, what you hear. And this is the reason why most people will prefer to be situated in an environment of what we call empowering people. And there's a saying that says that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with and that you allow to influence you. And I believe that there is an element of truth in that. Not really the 5 people you spend the most time with, because if you spend your time with your kids, it doesn't mean you become a child. I think that is true on the basis that you are the average of the 5 people you allow to influence you with their philosophies and their beliefs, because that's now different, because they're trying to change and get you to adopt or adapt your thinking pattern. Now, the fourth is your relationships. Always ask yourself the question, who am I around? Very important question. Who am I around? Who you spend your time with decides who you become. Charlie Jones has a very famous quote. He says that in 5 years you will be the same person that you are today, apart from the books you read and the people you allow to influence you. The last part of that quote I had to put in, because the actual quote just simply says the books you read and the people that you meet or interact with. But I've taken it a step further to say, no, it's not just people you meet, it's the people you allow to influence you. The final item that affects your decision-making ability are your dreams and your goals. Your dreams of the future, your goals of tomorrow, they affect your decisions. So if you want to change your ability to make great decisions, you have to change the 5 factors. If you refuse to change those 5 factors, it doesn't matter how hard you try, your decision-making ability will still be almost a waste of time, because these 5 factors are foundational. It's really similar to having a building that has a fractured or faulty foundation and you continue to build on it. What that simply means is that a time will come when the building will collapse. So the foundation is the most important thing. So to change your life, to change your decision making ability in such a way that it becomes almost exceptional, you have to look at the 5 factors. Ask yourself, what are my beliefs? And am I making room for new beliefs? And I think every belief should be tested. And there shouldn't be any shame in testing a belief. Because truth, real truth, doesn't mind being tested. So if you have a good belief and it's the right belief, it's okay to be tested. And the reason I say this is because growing up, there were so many beliefs that I held on to, which were passed on to me by the people I grew up with. And the person I am now, looking back, a lot of those beliefs were not for me. They were not empowering. They were based on very limited wisdom and knowledge. And so it's very, very important that you question the beliefs that you have. I don't say reject them, but just question them. Because the world is much bigger than you think. Your philosophies also has to be questioned and checked. And ask yourself the question, am I being open to other ways of thinking? Because if I keep looking at the world through my lens, then I restrict myself from maybe experiencing a different way of life or living that could be beneficial to me. My environment, always question and ask yourself, am I spending time with the right people? Let me give you a good example. If you were to decide that you wanted to spend time with people who are business inclined, who were perhaps investors, the more time you spend with them, the more you start to pick up some buzzwords. You might start to pick up some investment words. The more you ask questions, the more they educate you. Suddenly, your knowledge starts to increase in that particular area. And that's the subtle impact that influence can have on you. Similarly, if you were to spend time with a lot of personal trainers, because they're into health and fitness, you start to pick up some buzzwords. You start to understand the science of the body. You start to understand the science of nutrition. You start to change the way you train, possibly change the way you eat, and suddenly you're changing. Your beliefs are changing. Again, that is the power of relationships. But your dreams and goals also affect the decisions you make. So let me give you very quickly, and I'll try not to spend time on this because I've gone on for a while. Let me give you 10 ways, 10 very simple ways to make good decisions. 10 very simple ways to make good decisions. The first has to do with recognizing and changing your state. I'll say that again. Recognizing, and this has to be done quickly, and changing your state. Let me explain what that means. Have you ever been in a situation whereby you reacted in a way that maybe 2 hours later on, when you look back, you said, I apologize, that was unlike me? Maybe you reacted in a negative way, or you overreacted. That's the first question. The second question is, have you ever been in a situation whereby you reacted, or rather not reacted, you responded to an experience or an event, and an hour later on you look back and you smiled and said, I made the right decision. I'm proud of the decision I made. Now, in both cases, what was different? Now, I've been in such case in a similar scenario like each of those examples, and in the first one, I found that I overreacted because I was in a mental state that was not congruent with the outcomes that I wanted. I overreacted because maybe I was at that point in time, going through an emotional roller coaster. And I reacted based on my emotions. And one of the biggest things we have to learn how to do is how not to react emotively. Similarly, there have been all the times when I've made decisions and I've looked back and I've said, wow, that was good. And I felt proud. And why? Maybe because I was in a very positive state. Maybe I had experienced, some form of pleasure and excitement and passion, happiness and love. And something happened, so I reacted based on the positive state that I found myself in. Very important. Now, what does this mean for you in making decisions? This is what it means. Every time you make a decision, at the point you're about to make a decision, take a few seconds, and it shouldn't be any more than 3 or 4 seconds, and ask yourself very quickly, am I in the right state? And is my state congruent or consistent with the outcomes that I want? Why is this important? There's a big difference between results and what we do. When we make decisions, in some cases, we tend to make decisions based on what we have to do, rather than what results we want to get. Two very big different, it's like two opposite sides of a coin. What you do does not always provide you with what you want. It's the means. What you do is often the means to the end. What you get is the end. So by working from the end and working backwards, beginning with the end in mind, by asking yourself, what results do I want? What results do I want? Once you know the results you want, then that can guide you in what you have to do. So whenever you want to make a decision, just ask yourself, am I in the right mental state? Am I in the right physical state? Am I in the right emotional state? Am I in the right psychological state? By asking yourself this question, you can make the right decisions. There have been times when I've made decisions and they've been made very late in the evening. Like, I'll give you a good example. A few minutes ago, I was about to send an email to a client, and I looked at the time and it was quite late. And I felt tired. And as I was about to open up the laptop and start typing the email, it suddenly hit me that I was going to rush the email because the state I'm in physically, but also mentally, is quite low. Because I've had a whole day, it's almost midnight, and so I realized it's the wrong time to send an important email because your state is not congruent with the outcomes you want. So I decided, wait, do it in the morning. It can wait. Let's move very quickly to number 2. The second is accept complete responsibility. What does this mean? Well, this simply means that by starting out from the basis and saying to yourself, I am responsible, and that the buck stops with me, that empowers you to take full accountability for the outcomes. This is important. Once you see yourself as the captain of the ship, once you see yourself as the one in command, you are empowering yourself on making the right choices and decisions. On the other hand, if you just see yourself as a spectator in life, if you see yourself as not really being able to influence your destiny, if you see yourself as one of those that, let's see what the future holds, I can guarantee you your decisions will be feeble. On the other hand, if you see yourself as the master of your universe, if you see yourself as the one responsible for the outcomes in your life, if you believe and you have the view that your destiny is based on the choices and the decisions you make, then the steps you take towards getting to that future will be different. So the second thing you must do to make good decisions is always start by saying, before I make a decision, just say to yourself in your mind, I'm responsible. I'm responsible. Because once you say I'm responsible, you're saying I'm the solution. Once you see yourself as the solution, you'll be shocked at how well you make good decisions. The third has to do with your goals and your dreams. In making decisions, like I said a few minutes ago, always connect the decisions you make to a goal, to an outcome, to a result. By connecting the decisions you make to a goal, you know exactly at the point of making the decision if it's right or if it's wrong. You know. You just know because you've connected each step to the destination. You've connected each step to the destination. To make good decisions, get very clear, and this is why it's important. You have to know what the end result should be. You have to know what it would look like, what it would feel like, what it would taste like, what it would smell like. You have to get good at being able to set goals. Those who can set goals, those who are goal driven, those who are dreamers, those who like to document their visions and their dreams in writing and have a plan set out and form a strategy, are normally good decision makers. And the reason is simply because they have allowed themselves to get away from the dream cocoon, which is where you have it in a dream state. It's still a picture in your mind. It's like a wish. Because they've disciplined themselves to capture it in writing, they've put a timeline, they've come up with a plan, they have a strategy. It means that they've actually taken time to think. And what is just hear me out on this. What is thinking? Thinking is simply the process of asking yourself questions. And the more you ask questions, the more you start to uncover layers and layers of the right choices that have to be made. You start to eliminate the choices that are not necessary. You start to eliminate the disempowering options, and then it leaves you with the right and the few, or rather the vital few, that would make a difference, and then you can make a decision. So to make good decisions, get very good at connecting your goals and your outcomes to the decisions and choices you make on a daily basis. I believe that's 3 options I've gave you so far. Let's move to number 4. Number 4 is to make good decisions, you have to understand something, that decision making and the art of making good decisions is not an innate ability. You know, we're not like animals where we have just the genetic code only. We have a free will, and we're all born with 3 qualities. We come into the world naked, we come into the world scared, and we come into the world ignorant. Everyone. So we have to be trained on how to make good decisions. So continuous learning is a criteria. It's almost a must if you want to become a great decision maker. And what does that simply mean? That means that you continue to teach and train and develop your mind. How? By reading biographies, autobiographies, books, by sharing the knowledge you have. Those who have achieved what you do not have in your life and what you admire know something that you do not know at this present moment. And you can leverage time, and you can leverage their life experiences by learning from them. In a book, by reading a book for 4 hours, you can learn what took a woman or took a man 40 years to learn. In 4 hours, you can learn what took someone 40 years. But that requires the investment of your time. That requires you sacrificing 4 hours. So those who have always been known to be great decision makers are very good learners. If you look through history, those who make great decisions are those who have a passion for knowledge and increasing their wisdom and increasing their understanding, and they invest a lot of time in continuous improvements. How? By books, by looking out for mentors, people who can guide and coach them, by associating with a mastermind group, by networking with the right associations. So continuous learning is number 4. Very important. You were not born with the ability to make good decisions. It's a skill, but it's a skill that has to be nurtured. It's a skill that has to be practiced, developed on a daily basis. Because one thing that is constant and guaranteed in life is change. We live in an information world now, and the knowledge that you have is doubled almost every 16 hours. The knowledge you have is becoming obsolete so quickly, so there's always so much more coming out. Because our desires, our needs change regularly, and the world is changing, you have to keep increasing your level of knowledge and wisdom to stay, just to even maintain the same level that you are right now. Let's move to number 5. Now, I would say number five is that you have to become disciplined in making sure that you don't make decisions when you are emotionally involved. So I would say avoid making emotive decisions. Whenever you want to make a decision, discipline yourself to move away from your heart and take the elevator from your heart and go all the way up to your brain and your mind, where creativity lies. The people who make good decisions are those who let go of the emotion and think creatively. Use your mind, use your brain to think, because your emotions always cloud your decision making. Make a good example. Let's say in real estate, if you've ever gone either to view a house to buy or to rent, there are some houses that you walk into, and if you're not careful, the layouts of the house, the coziness of the house, you just feel, I love this place, this is what I want. But any good investor, and every time I go to view properties, one of the things I always discipline myself to do is this. Turn a blind eye, forget what you see, imagine the property as empty, imagine the property as not being as attractive as you want. So you have to do two things. You got to get rid of all emotion and think objectively. Think like an investor. Think like a businessman and say, what am I not seeing? There is something hidden that I cannot see. Your duty in that period that you have is to identify what you cannot see, because what you can see is obvious. On the other hand, if it's a property that is run down, you want to look for potential. So you don't look at what you see, you look at what could be. I like what Horace Mann said. This doesn't have to do with properties, but it has to do with people. Horace Mann said, if you look at a man the way that he is, and this applies to women, don't get hung up with the choice of terminology. I am not being gender specific right now, but I'm quoting someone. He said, look at a man the way that he is, he only becomes worse. Look at a man the way that he could be, then he becomes what he should be. And that has to do with creating a vision for someone and having them live into that vision. So coming back to real estate, there are times when you walk into a property, it looks really nice, it looks well done, but there is something you're not seeing. You've got to ask yourself, what am I not seeing? On the other hand, there's some properties you walk into and you look at it and it looks run down, it looks as though it doesn't have potential, but you've got to look through the layering and the decorations that don't look very attractive and say, what could this become? In the same way, emotions affect your decision making ability. Those who are able to make decisions are those who are skilled in disciplining their emotions, calming the emotions down before they make a decision. So remember this. Avoid making decisions emotively, because any decisions you make that you're emotionally involved with, your judgment could be clouded. Now, let's move on. Number 6, and I'll do this quickly. I may not be able to tell you all of them because looking at the time, I've taken some of your time, much longer than I thought. But number 6 is always remember that a decision is yours to make. So I would say, before making a decision, do something. if it's a long-term decision, if it's a long-term and it's an important strategic decision, give yourself 24 hours or give yourself 48 hours before you make the decision. And I think this also applies to if you're trying to, if you've walked through a shop and you've seen something that you like, it's the best way to move away from instant gratification. It's the best way to delay gratification, where you put a time between when you feel like making the decision and when you actually make the decision. So I would say for all important decisions, when you can, if you can, extend the deadline. Give yourself 24 hours and just sleep over the decision, because you'll be amazed. I'll give you a good example. In a number of years ago, has to do with business. I made a decision that I look back at later on, and I felt I could have done it differently. The reason was because when I made the decision, I hadn't given myself enough time. I felt pressured because I was told that the deal was so hot and I had to do something immediately, otherwise someone would have taken it. Biggest mistake I made was I should have said, I don't have the deal now. I don't have it. I didn't have it before I met you. So if I lose it, then I haven't really lost anything because I never had it. But I was influenced by the pressure that was created, and I liked the deal. So I made a decision based on how I felt, without taking time to say, I need a few minutes, I need a few hours, I need one day, and I'll come back to you. So I would say any long-term important decision that has to be made, always, always, always give yourself at least 24 hours before you make the decision. Number 7, avoid making decisions when you're fatigued, when you're tired. That's a killer. When you're tired, you do not function at optimum level. Your body needs rest and restoration. If you make decisions when you're tired, you make the wrong decision. I'm fascinated by the fact that if you read either the Bible or if you read the Quran, I'm fascinated because I enjoy reading. So I read a lot of these books like a child, with curiosity but also with interest and fascination, without an attachment to a particular belief, without an attachment to a particular philosophy. And I try to read out of each book, not into the book. But I'm fascinated by the book of Genesis, where it says that God made the world in 6 days, and every day he made something, but on the 7th day he decided to rest. And what puzzles me is how he could have made up, if you believe in that creation, and if you believe in a God. I'm not putting any belief on you, I'm just expressing a puzzling question I had in my mind. The question was, and this is me reading the story like a child, the puzzling question to me was, if he could create the sun, create the stars, create all the galaxies, which is incredible, by the way, create all the seas, create all the animals, create man, if he could do every single thing in 6 days, why did he have to rest for one whole day? And in my funny way of thinking, I just came to the conclusion that rest is as important as work when you take it at the right time. I'm not saying it's as important that you should apportion the same level of time. No, I'm saying the rest itself has its own purpose, because the quality of your restoration and rest determines your performance the next day. And so I would say one of the best ways of making good decisions is never make decisions when you're fatigued. Interestingly, did you know that George W. Bush and a few other presidents, including President Obama, never made decisions beyond a certain time of the day. I believe it was between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. They would never make a decision because at that point of the day, they had spent the whole day making decisions and they were emotionally and physically fatigued. Their willpower had depleted. Remember, your willpower is like a muscle. The more you use it, the more it weakens. You need time to rest to enable it to expand and grow. They never made decisions between a certain time. I'll give you a classic example in my life. This business example, I made a decision, and this particular decision was in response to something, but I made that decision at roughly about midnight. And I had been working since 5 a.m. the day before, and I hadn't rested, and I was fatigued. And I made the business decision. By 6 o'clock the next morning, I woke up. I felt restored. I felt well rested. But I woke up and I knew immediately that I made the wrong decision because I hadn't rested. That decision cost me, let's put it this way, that decision cost me much more than I can explain to you. Just put it that way. It was devastating. Why? Because I hadn't rested. I hadn't rested. So number 7 is never make important decisions when you're fatigued. Number 8, find yourself a circle of advisors, people you trust, people you can go back to, look up to and say, I have something important I need to make. I need your counsel. I need your support. I need to know what you think. Always have a circle of advisors, people who support you. Think about this. You can take a mouse and put him as the president of a country and surround the mouse with great men, great advisors, and that mouse will be a great president. On the other hand, you can take a genius and put him on the office of the president and surround him with idiots, and his presidency will be a failure. Why? Because you are only as good as the advisors you have around you. So I would say invest in developing a circle of trusted advisors that you know, that you can go to as soon as you want to bounce off an idea. And remember this, that in every area of life, someone knows something that you don't know. Never try to live your life on your mind alone. One of the biggest mistakes I've made in life was trying to do everything on my own. Someone knows something that you don't know. It's your responsibility to find out who that person is and seek for their knowledge and seek for their wisdom when the time comes. And remember this, it's okay to have more than one advisor. There are various areas of life. There is health, there is well-being, there is business, there is relationships. So find good people and people who you can trust. You need trusted advisors. Number 9, I would say number 9 is, for every decision you make, find the time, if you can, find the time, and this has to do with important decisions. I'm not referring to whether you would have a sandwich for lunch or not. I'm talking about important decisions. Whenever you've made an important decision, find the time to capture it in writing. Just journal what decision you made. The reason is because you want to start capturing a number of, or an evidence list of your ability to make the right decisions. Because at some point you want to be able to review the decisions you've made so you can see a pattern, and that way you can start course correcting. You cannot manage something that cannot be measured. You have to be able to measure your progress. The biggest problem we have as individuals is that we go through life making the same mistakes, expecting a different outcome. Someone called that insanity, but we do every day. The reason is because we never stop to review our performance. We never stop to review the decisions we're making. If we could simply stop at the end of the day and say, I made some decisions today, which of them did I get right, and which would I do differently? I think just that feedback alone puts you in the whole platform of what I call constant, never-ending improvement. That's powerful. So make a choice, make a decision today that on a daily basis, at the end of the day, take 2 minutes. It doesn't have to be more than 2 minutes, and just replay the tapes, run the tapes again in your mind and say, what decisions did I make? What could I have done differently? And if I had a choice to do it again, what would I do? You'll be shocked at how much you learn every day. And the more you receive feedback, the more you get better. The more you get feedback, the more your decisions get better. And the final 10th item that I was going to share with you is, when the time comes to make an important decision, write down 5 questions concerning that decision. Just journal 5 random questions. Ask yourself 5 empowering questions about that decision. What do I need to know? What do I not know? What does this mean? I like a statement that someone once said. I cannot remember if it was Warren Buffett, I'm not really sure. But this was the question that was asked at a time when an important decision had to be made. And I think he said, what is the best that can happen? What is the worst that can happen? And what is the most likely thing that will happen? 3 questions. Now think about those 3 questions. What is the best that can happen? What is the worst that can happen? And what is the most likely event that would occur, or the likely outcome? Those 3 questions automatically change your focus. It helps you stay more objective rather than subjective. So the final 10th way of making good decisions is always stop and ask yourself 5 empowering questions about the decisions or the outcomes you want. You might simply say, what outcome or results do I want? Why do I want it? How can I get it? How will I know when I've achieved it? Just ask yourself questions. Just let yourself go. Now, I hope that's been quite useful. I've given you 10 ways in which you can get better at making good decisions. I want you to, if you can, find a way to listen to this a few more times so that you start to remember these items, because what is interesting but also important is that about 70% of the decisions we make on a daily basis, we make them subconsciously. We don't know we're making them. More than 70% of the decisions we make on a daily basis is made automatically because we're making them subconsciously. So to make great decisions, we have to go from the conscious mind down to the subconscious level. The best way to get to the subconscious level is through repetition. Spaced repetition is the mother of all skill. If you want to get good at making good decisions, then like I said, there's 5 factors that affect your ability to make decisions, and this 10 ways in which you can start becoming better has to be driven down into your subconscious, and you do that through repetition. So as you go away today, I want to wish you the best. I hope you become exceptional in making good decisions. If this has been helpful to you, why don't you send me a quick note? Send me something on social media, tweet me, Instagram me, or Facebook me. If you're not following me, you might want to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I think it's very important because on a daily basis I produce some videos about my thoughts. I share some of the things that I've learned from the day, but also I also share some of the things that I would do differently based on my experiences. And I think they're quite useful. If you've listened to me this long, then you have a passion for wisdom, and I want to be part of your life. I want to know who you are. I want to know how I can help you. I want to know how I can serve you. So reach out to me, tell me who you are, tell me where you are, and tell me whether there are other techniques and strategies that you use that have helped you, because I want to learn from you as well. And until I, you know, either hear from you or speak to you again, I want to just say that I wish you the best. God bless.